please be aware that if you're doing this video with me, you do not have to do everything required or what I'm suggesting to do. Please listen to your body at all times. Yoga does not mean we're trying to push ourselves. You actually want to stay at your edge or back behind your edge so that you're not pushing yourself towards an injury. Please check in with a doctor if you have any issues going on with your body to make sure this will be appropriate for you. We are going to be doing a yin practice today, which is why I'm wearing my yin yang shirt. Most of you are probably already familiar with this ancient and sacred symbol. The black part, well, it's gray on here, but the darker side represents the yin, and the lighter side represents the yang or yang. And if you look at the two dots within it, you can see on the white side there is a little bit of darkness there, and on the dark side there's a little bit of the lightness there. This symbol is all about creating balance. So if you think about what yin represents, what yang represents, the yang represents what is active, what is fiery or heating. It represents the heavens or the sky, things that are masculine, logical or intelligent. That's kind of the basics. The yin represents the feminine, what is darker, what is more grounding, what is more earth-like. It also can represent water. It's also what's intuitive and what we're able to accept versus the yang is more being goal-oriented. The yin is meant to be a little bit more passive. So we have very active and heating practices of yoga that I would consider yang or yang. And the more cooling, calming practices can be considered more yin. There was a period of time in 2006 where I experienced like 3 deaths in a row. And one of those being the death of my marriage and the relationship I had with my high school sweetheart of 16 years. That was already a big blow, and at that time I was taking care of my grandmother who was sick and dying of colon cancer, and I was going to her house every weekend to stay with her, and she passed away. And then one of my best friends that I'd been best friends with for about 8 years had some surgery. Her parents were going through a divorce, and she just kind of wiped the slate clean and moved away and kind of cut everybody off. And so I felt like between what happened with my husband and losing my grandmother and one of my best friends, it was like 3 deaths. And I had been doing yoga for already 6 years at that time, and most of the yoga that I had done was active. And all of a sudden during that time frame in 2006, I started doing passive poses and holding them for a longer period of time, but it wasn't restorative. And I didn't quite have a name for it. And then soon after that, I discovered something called yin yoga. So I have actually fallen in love with yin yoga. It's something that we do in our Moonbeam teacher training. And it's not always well received in our teacher training because it is different than what most people are used to. If you are arthritic or if you have a history of herniated disc, this practice is probably not the best for you. If you have hip issues, I would say practice on the side of caution, especially with what we're going to be doing today, because we're going to be working into the hips. I wanted to go over 2 different meridians today, and I'm just going to kind of breeze through them. We've already uploaded videos for this gallbladder meridian. That is the yang pairing for the yin liver meridian. And then we also have already worked on the stomach meridian. That is the yang for the yin meridian for the spleen. And both the spleen and the liver meridians kind of run up through the inside of the legs and move into the inner part of the hips. So I'm gonna kind of bring in the combination of the 2 with this practice. So with the liver meridian, remember I said the meridians are like energetic pathways in the body, very similar to what we call nadis in the yogic tradition. In Chinese medicine or in the Taoist viewpoint of the liver, you know, the liver kind of resides on the right side of the body, kind of tucked up under here. It's considered the general. It helps to filter, detoxify, and even store the blood. It also helps to trap within the bile any pathogens or anything that the body cannot use or is unneeded for the body. So if we have excessive energy here, if we have deficient energy here, if the energy flow is stuck or stagnant at all, we can get irritable, jealous, angry, enraged, impatient, things of that nature. And so we want to move back towards the prenatal state of the liver, which they say is love and compassion, benevolence, and patience. So we're trying to clean this area out. So it's just a general idea of where this pathway runs. It runs from the big toe across the top of the foot to the inner ankle, and then it moves up the inner part of the leg towards the growing. It then comes up into the upper body close to the abdomen. It runs on both sides, but of course on the right side it moves towards the gallbladder and the liver. It then moves up the diaphragm and continues up the chest into the throat and into the eyes. There's another branch that moves from the eyes down to the cheek to the lips, and there's another branch that moves into the diaphragm from that liver to the lungs. The pathway for the spleen, since we're going to talk about the spleen too. The spleen helps us to wonder whether or not we are accepting and digesting our situations, our placement, and happenings in life. So the spleen is very similar to the emotions that are held within the stomach because those pairings work together. So remember when we did the stomach meridian, I said stress is the big factor for the stomach. Well, stress is still a factor for the spleen, but the emotion kind of tied in with it when it's energy deficient or too abundant, stuck or stagnant, those sort of things, any type of imbalance, you're going to experience worry. So that kind of worrisome mindset goes back to the spleen. And I felt like, oh man, these are two great things to be talking about right now through this pandemic, as well as other times. You know, we tend to be worrisome creatures. We tend to worry about things, but there is a common saying, why worry about things that haven't even happened? And I want to encourage you to think of a statement that I sometimes bring in restorative yoga: no hurry, no worry. The spleen also helps to filter and store the blood, even though it's different than the function of the liver. So the spleen meridian works from the big toe through the inside or the medial side of the foot. It also travels up the inside of the leg, and it moves up into the abdomen, moving towards the spleen and the stomach. And then of course there's another branch that moves up towards the stomach meridian as well as the heart meridian. So we're going to focus on working this part of the body today. The thing that I want to remind you about yin yoga, you never want to go fully to your edge or go past your edge, because we hold the poses longer, and because we linger and kind of marinate in the poses, I want you to be able to breathe fully and efficiently through it. And the only way you're going to do that is if you go to about 75 to 80% maybe of your edge, and then you can kind of creep down towards 100% towards the end of that time frame. But then always remember, you can back up, or you can completely come out, or you can skip to the next one if you need to. The other thing about yin, besides finding your appropriate edge and holding it for a period of time, the third thing is you want to relax and become as passive as possible in it, because in the yin poses we're trying to get passive and more relaxed, so we target the connective tissues of the body. You are going to feel some pull in the muscles because it will work the fascia that also goes into the muscle as well. We're not going to be as alignment based in yin. I actually love that part because I'm a rebel at heart, and so I kind of like to move away from the rules sometimes, and yin's perfect for that. So what we're going to do You can have a bolster if you want. I'm gonna have it close by. Yeah, I'm gonna have it close by because we may be moving into a pose where if you have blocks, you could use blocks, but you could also use a prop like this. So what I'm gonna do to start off with today is we're gonna start off in child's pose to begin with. Yin poses are kept closer to the ground for that grounding influence. So let's go ahead and start in child's pose. Now some people like the extended form of child pose, which is kind of laid out like this. And that would be opening up the inner thighs to move into those meridians. However, I'm going to choose to bring and to knit the legs together today. So I'm on the top portions of the feet. And I'm allowing the big toes to come together to touch, which would signify that liver meridian that also travels across the top of the foot. Before I go into child's pose, and before you go into child's pose, you're welcome to lean back into your hands and to rest on the top portions of the feet and to elevate your knees and shins. Now you can just simply do this. Some people like to really create an opening for the heart and the throat as well, so you can be as expressive as you choose to be. We're gonna lower back down to the floor. Since I'm gonna do the more traditional child's pose, I'm gonna place my thumbs into that hip crease. I'm gonna roll the shoulders back, and I'm gonna bow out over the thighs. But as soon as I start to rest the belly on the thighs, I'm gonna let the hands fall away by the wayside, and I'm gonna purposely round the back here, drooping the shoulders over the knees, and resting on the brow. Again, you can take the extended form if that's better for you. I know if you are larger busted or have more weight here in your belly, this might be too uncomfortable. So please allot that space if you need it between the legs. And then once you come down into child's pose, take time to close your eyes and just focus on your breathing. Breathing in and out through the nose. I want you to consider the spine. And I want you to imagine your spine is like edges or ridges on a rough rock. But each time you take a diaphragmatic breath, see if you can surf the wave of the breath up through the backside of your body. You'll also feel your belly and chest expanding and deflating as well. But as you focus on that undulation up and down alongside the spine, I want you to imagine that you're like that rough stone that's been tossed into a river and it's flowing downstream. And as you're riding the wave of your breath, imagining that rock tumbling and flowing through the river, through the rapids, and maybe across the edge of the cliff, down a waterfall to the pool of water below. Just think about the journey of that stone. How over time and with force, how the impact as well as the water eventually smoothed out all the rough edges. And I want those rough edges to represent the imbalances that we can experience in life and also in these organs and within these energetic channels, such as worry, unacceptance, intolerance, impatience, irritability, aggravation, rage, jealousy, things of that nature. Let's take 3 more breaths. And on your next inhale, go ahead and extend your arms nice and long. Lift your head up and separate your thighs just a bit if they're still knit together. We're going to walk the hands across to the right side of the mat. We're going to lower back down into a side child's position. And we're going to breathe really deep into that left lung, into the left side body. Once we've created some clearing here, we're not going to hold these poses as long. We're just going to inhale, lift the face up, travel the hands across now to the left, and then gently release. Hone in upon your breath. Breathe with depth and control. Now pouring that breath down into the right lung specifically, opening up the right side body. I really think it's important and vital to open up the sides of the body at the very beginning of the practice so that we have more clearance for breath. If we have more clearance for the breath, we'll be able to develop that sweet surrender, not only physically in our bodies, but in the psyche of our own minds. On your next inhale, gently begin to lift your way up. Walk your hands back to center, and then we're going to rock up to hands and knees. And when we rock up to hands and knees, we're going to start with the left side. So we're going to step the left foot forward, and when you step the left foot forward and lunge into that knee, you are dropping down through your hips. And sometimes I even like to bring in examples in yin, like nice visuals. And I don't want this to be frightening to you, but I want you to consider as if you were in quicksand, and your mat was quicksand, and you were just getting burrowed and buried down towards the ground. And if you want to go a little deeper in this pose, you're welcome to bring your props. Again, it could be blocks, a footstool, a bolster, whatever you have available. We're going to heel toe the left foot over, just maybe a step or two. And you are welcome to rest on your fist if your wrists happen to be tender. You can, of course, stay stacked on palms, but I would spread out the fingers and maybe help to distribute the weight there. But you also have the option to sink the forearms gently down to your mat. Now this is where a prop could come in, and I'll use the prop if you want to join along. I'll bring the prop in just to the inside of the foot. I'll set the forearms here. You don't necessarily have to interlace your hands, but I would like you to bow your head. This is part of the Dragon series. And I know yin can become a little intense, so you're not continually pressing the hips to the floor, you're just surrendering and melting in that direction. Now I would encourage you to elongate your exhalations because that's going to give you a deeper state of release. It will help you in the process of letting go, which is what the yin practice really is all about. And I really think that's why I naturally was drawn to poses like this and lingered in them longer, because I was experiencing such grief and so many relations kind of departing from my life that were so special to me, at least at one point, that I found myself kind of naturally going into these poses. Now with yin, obviously, please don't stay here if it's causing pain or strain or if you're holding your breath at all. So you can always back up if that becomes too intense. You know, you can move the prop and you can come back to where you started. However, if you kept it back a little bit and your body starts to warm up and accept what you're giving it, you might be able to drop lower. So pay attention in every passing moment. Now you can stay in that lower formation for this. What we're going to be doing is slightly turning the left toes away from the body and slightly rolling to the outer edge of the foot. And that way we're going more into a winged dragon. So that knee that's kind of fanning open away from the side body operates like the wing of the dragon. We're going to take this into a twist in a moment. Again, you can stay stacked on your arms and hands or forearms. You can play around with it and see what works for you. But I do want you to stay mindful, especially during this pandemic, that a lot of the stress that has been coming at us from breaking down our foundation, interrupting our homes, making us isolated more at home, impacting the collective consciousness and how we're interconnected, or that can affect those first and second chakras. And I'm not going to get into chakras today, but we're working into it with these particular poses. Now, you can, again, stay lower or taller. You're going to place the left hand on the knee, and you can move into a twist. Because this is a more intense sequence, we're going to go ahead and come out. We're going to take both hands to the floor. We're going to curl the back toes under, elevate the back knee. And I want you to step it back to downward facing dog. Now you can also take it to plank or tabletop. But you may want the inversion. You may want to lengthen through your limbs, your back. And on your next exhalation, gently descending back down to your knees. We'll move that to the second side. So the right foot's going to step forward. Now this is a mistake I often see. I see the foot not quite ahead enough, and see how the knee tracks way past the ankle. And again, there's not a lot of alignment rules necessarily in yin, but I would suggest, if you want to protect that knee, especially if you have issues with the knee, stacking it over the ankle. And it's okay, again, if it tracks beyond, if it's healthy. Just continue to pay attention to the sensations that erupt. And we're going to move the right hand to the inside. We'll heel toe that right foot over just a step or two. And then again, you can kind of play around with your formation here. Stacked on the stilts of the arms, grounding through the palms, spreading out through the fingers. You may need to be stacked on fist. You may want to explore this side to see what's possible. And because I encourage you to use props if you need to, or if you feel like you need to bring the floor to meet you halfway, I'm going to bring this in as an example. And then if you close your eyes, you can kind of scan through the body. Are you truly becoming passive? Are you able to let go physically and just move in the direction of gravity? Or feel as though you're getting sucked down into quicksand? Utilizing that longer exhalation to provide that. That long exhalation can also calm you from the inside out. Will reduce your reactivity so that you're not wanting to run out of a pose or jump out of a pose too quickly. Because like I said, these can be intense. We're moving right into it today. We're going to move the prop out of the way if you no longer need it, to turn the right toes out and to roll to the outer edge of the foot, going more into the winged dragon. You could be in that low flying winged dragon, and that's perfectly fine. And you may notice a difference between the two sides. The right side typically is considered the more masculine side. The left side is usually considered the more feminine side. The right side, we tend to hold more anger. The left side, we tend to hold more sadness. And if you want want to move into the twist now, prop your right hand up to the inner part of the thigh. You're not using your hand to push into the leg, it's just resting there. You are rolling open through the right shoulder, slightly turning your gaze across it, gazing back behind you, and just shifting your eyes. Remember that liver meridian also affects the eyes. So you can practice a little eye yoga in the mix. Slowly begin to unwind from the twist. You can solidify that right foot. You can curl the back toes under. And you can move back into your downward facing dog. Now, you can stay in downward facing dog. Or if you prefer tabletop position, you can always step one foot back and kind of press through the back calf and heel, straightening one leg at a time. You could also go into plank, but plank is more yang, it's more yang style. It requires more power and strength. Yin is more like deep stretching. All right, we're gonna come back into Adho Mukha Svanasana if by chance you join me on the knees. And from downward facing dog, we're gonna move into the next pose of swan. So we're gonna bring the right shin towards the front of the mat, and we're gonna extend the left leg back behind us. When you extend that left leg back behind you, you're gonna move towards sleeping swan by casually moving forward and down with your upper body. Some people like to use these bolsters to kind of lay on top of. I'm just going to move my elbows forward and prop into prayer hands. You can melt all the way towards the floor as if you were turning into a pool of water. If you feel really stiff on this side of your body, you can imagine your hip being like a big ice cube. And each breath you take, and that warm sensation that begins to kindle in the hips, you can imagine it melting that ice from a solid to a liquid form. Nice and yin to have some quiet time. And in that quiet time, notice where the mind may want to roam. See if you can stay away from worrisome thoughts. And if your mind starts to travel that direction anyway, remember in the sutras it says you can replace it with the opposite. And so one song that I would like to remind you of is Bob Marley. Don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be alright. Don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be alright. So if you need a little positive statement or song to roll over in your mind, that's a good one while we're working into the liver and spleen meridians. Inhale, we're slowly going to come up to the top. We're going to flatten the palms. You can curl the back toes again, tabletop, straightening one leg at a time like I demonstrated before, or you can roll back to downward facing dog.
And maybe even noticing the difference between the left and the right side of the body. And then when you're ready, let's bring the left shin and knee to the top. Open up the heart initially, look forward, and then begin to release downward. Each side's different. You can, again, use the bolster. You can use your forearms. You can even stack fists. And I'm going to move into the same position I did earlier. Even though I feel much more open on this side than the other, I'm going to choose to be here. And if you want a different visual for this side, you can consider your hip being like a stick of butter. A butter that's been placed on the pan, on the eye of a stove. And when you feel that heat beginning to kindle on the left hip, you can think about that stick of butter beginning to melt. Maybe even sizzling a little bit. Sometimes the sensations does feel like a sizzling sensation. You just don't want it to be sharp or shooting pain. Slow, deep rhythmic breathing, or emphasizing a longer out breath. For yourself, for some inner self-reflection, or for some deeper contemplative work. Rise up. As you rise up, you're going to flatten your hands. Now, see how that knee has been turned slightly to the side of the mat? We're going to slide it so it's facing the front. I'm going to curl the back toes under and you can join me. We're going to lift the weight up and move forward so that we're tucking that right knee right up underneath the left. And then we can release back into shoelace pose. If that transition didn't work for you, you can come back to sit. And some people need to perhaps straighten the right leg and just hook the left leg over by itself. You might be able to bring both heels back more alongside your hips. So this is called shoelace in yin. And for now, what we're going to do is rest on the finger pads and we're going to rise up fully through the crown of the head because we do want to create space and length for the low back because we're going to start to hinge forward to fold. So once you create the length and begin to hinge forward, take your time. You may need to pause at any point along the way, depending again on how you're feeling. Now, in this particular position, you may feel it more on the outer frame of the hip, but that's okay because that's the gallbladder meridian. And that is the yang pairing for the yin liver meridian that we're working with today. So it's okay to move into its complement. You can also surrender down so that you're kind of plummeting your chest over your knees and maybe even lowering your chin or your head in the direction or beyond the knee.
Inhale, slowly start to rise up. And as you start to rise up, we're going to lean back into the hands. We're going to slide the right foot forward, away from the hip. And we're going to slide the left ankle on top of the right knee. And then we're going to push away from the hands to try to sit upright again. Now this is what's called double pigeon or double fire log. The idea is to get the knees and the ankles stacked, and you should see a triangle in your lap, or in that center part of the lap. And there may be a big gap here. Some people like to put a little padding, although I wouldn't suggest it yet. And here's why. If you press down and root through the finger pads and rise up fully through your chest and your head, you're going to find that that may decrease or lower that gap. We're going to start to hinge forward, and we're going to move into a deeper hip opener. And again, this may be what it looks like for you. This is perfectly fine and acceptable. And this is where we can move into acceptance of our bodies and what our bodies are allowing for us today. Sometimes, if there's no gap anyway, you can even put your elbows to rest to provide just a slight bit of weight bearing. That does make it more intense. You can also release over this way. Soften your throat and your jaw. And feel free to close your eyes. Staying on that inner journey. On your next in-breath, let's slowly start to rise up. Again, you can hold these poses longer, but I don't want to make it too intense. We're going to take that left leg and now slide it off to the side. The right ankle is going to draw in towards the pubic bone. Now this is kind of a half konasana in the yang form of yoga. In the yin form, it's called dragonfly or half dragonfly. So what we're going to do here is just inhale, uplift through the crown of the head. You don't have to be too active with the left leg. In fact, some people get a little bit more lax and the foot may roll in or out. For yin, it's kind of okay. I would just suggest, if you have any history of herniated disc, that you don't slump around the back. You keep your belly pulling in and up, and you keep the spine straighter. I happen to have a healthy back. So I am actually going to move a little closer towards the ground. And I'm going to find a way where I can round out and let go a little bit more. And you're really going to feel this pull up through the groin muscle and through the inner thigh muscles. This is that pathway of these two particular meridians we're discussing today. Try to stay calm, right? Calming, cooling. That's the idea of yin. Your next in-breath, maybe just float your head up. Maybe drop onto the palms and begin to back your way up. And as you start to back your way up, I want you to take your right arm skyward and start to curve and lean over to the left side. You know,
you might be able to take a hand to the inside of the foot or to the top of the toes. You may be more here, but with that top arm, you can create a C curve, right? It's a little bit more lax and loose in yin, and bending that top arm, making it a little bit heavier, can actually intensify the work through the right side body. Think of yourself just drizzling over to this one side. Just like icing kind of dribbles off the side of the cake, or wax pouring down from a lit candle. Because this can be more intense than you would realize, let's slowly just inhale, float the right arm skyward as well as the head and the neck. And then that way, it's a little bit more easeful to come back up to the top. So we're going to slide the right foot out again. We're going to move into some twists. And the left shin is going to stack on top like we did before. And we're going to move into what's called the hippie twist. I'm going to give you two different variations. One variation would be to hook the left elbow inside the arch of the left foot, place the palms together in prayer position, twisting to the right. Another variation of hippie twist is to take the back of the left hand and reach the right arm back. You can also slide it down so it's more of the forearm. So it's kind of a halfway point between the two. I'm not going to hold the twist as long. We're going to gently come back out. And then once you come back out, we're going to move now into that sequence on the other side. So the left shin is going to roll down to the floor, and we're going to pick up that right foot, and we're going to cross it over the opposite shin. Stacking the knees and the ankles. And then take your hands down to the floor, extend fully through the spine. And again, you may have to stay here. You may just be able to take one little hop forward with your hands. Again, unhealthy back, keep your core engaged, keep the spine long. If you have conditions with your knees, I would suggest keeping the feet active, which will help to protect the knees as well. Otherwise, they can be loose and limp. Maybe you want to rest a little bit of that weight here. Maybe you can take it a little deeper, maybe at some point along the way. Notice this goes both to the inside and to the outside of the thighs and hips. So there's really a blend working here. Notice in these longer held poses, sometimes you can feel pockets of tension just unravel, pop, and even kind of dissolve away. Since this is called fire log pose, you can even consider some of these releases, like if you were watching a fire, you know, and all of a sudden something cracks from the wood and pops up into the flame. There's a release of what's been held in that wood. Once you get into the shoelace pose again, you may need to have your left leg straight and your right leg hooked over. You can fold this way if this is too much for your body. Otherwise, stand strong with the fingertips, lift up through the crown of the head, and then begin to pour it down. Remembering yin, even though it's considered a passive practice, nobody ever said it was easy. This is not like restorative. Restorative is so easeful, you could pretty much go to sleep. But with yin, you are definitely feeling the work. I mean, it's a deep stretch. And we have the saying in yoga, you have to feel to deal to heal. So it's okay to experience that sensation as long as you can still control your breathing. All right, so coming out of shoelace pose, we're going to slowly climb up to the top, and we're going to move into that half dragonfly next. So we'll extend the right leg, and oh, that feels good, right? You can even shake the knee a little bit. And you're pulling that left heel in towards your pubic bone, resting on the tips of the fingers, again elongating the shaft of the spine, and then beginning to hinge. And then paying attention to side. Whew, maybe calling out for your loving attention a little bit more so than the other. I know this one is for me. Spleen, liver meridian is the focus, so consider any grievances, any irritability, anything that's made you enraged, anything that's maybe created some jealousy, what you've been impatient with, what you've been worried about, you know. I wouldn't dwell on these things, but maybe be contemplative about that as you're working into these meridians and through these poses on maybe a way that you can begin to create some balance for yourself, opening up this flow of energy, but also allowing your breath to calm the nervous system down, to clear the mind, so that you may get some sort of resolve, some sort of resolution, some sort of answer, or just letting go of it and just not allowing it to control you. Yoga is meant to be so much more than a physical practice. So really take this deeper and integrate it at a very spiritual level if you can. And it's why we call it practice. You know, even if you don't get it right away, or even if you don't release it right away, you could be chiseling away at it little by little, right? A person who is going to take a big piece of wood or stone and they're going to create a statue or a carving or an engraving, they have to chisel away at it piece by piece until the art forms, until they get their results. And so sometimes I like to think of my yoga practice being that way. On the next inhale, gently begin to rise up. We'll move into that side bend. So uplift your left arm and then just start to relax over to the right side, even creating that C curve with the upper arm. Even though it's really lax, it makes the body a little bit heavier. One more breath. Inhale, just lift your left arm first, then lift your head and your neck. And maybe that's a little bit more light and carefree to rise to the top. We're going to move the left foot out. Point the toes forward. Carry that right shin back on top. Ooh, I'm already feeling it here.
So that hippie twist, you know, you can move into it this way. You can move into it with your hand to the foot and the left arm swept behind you, or you can even go towards a halfway point between the back of the wrist and the elbow. And I do want us to do one more twist outside the hippie twist. So when you come out, I was going to do the Wheel of Life twist. That can be a little complicated. Do I want to do that? I kind of do want to do that. Let's do the Wheel of Life. So let's just take this top leg and bring it back to the side. It's almost like a deer. It doesn't have to be as extreme as deer, but we're going to lift up through the crown of the head and we're going to twist off to the left. And maybe this is all you do, okay? I like to mention the Wheel of Life, at least from my knowledge, what I've gained from it. The Wheel of Life represents the wheel of time, the wheel of our life, as far as birth, life, death, rebirth. If you go to a Buddhist temple, lots of times you'll see the Wheel of Life outside the temple, and the idea is to spin it. Sometimes it actually spins this way, depending on what kind of temple you're at. And sometimes it even has an inscription of Om Mani Padme Hum, and you can chant that as you're spinning it. I usually spin it 7 times. So when you're coming down towards the floor, if you want to get lower to the floor, you can come down to forearms. And I find most people like this version of it, but you can also go a little deeper by extending the arms out. Right arm forward, left arm to the side. And I'm turning to the left cheek because that feels easier for my neck. So it kind of depends on what you're going for. You may feel less here, and you may want to prop back up onto those Sphinx arms here. Again, just think about your body, where you hold and store tension, what feels good, where you can breathe better. Inhale, we'll gently come back up. We're not holding the twist as long. And then the same kind of formation, we're going to do it to the other side. So Wheel of Life. Inhale, again, adjust and lengthen up through your back, and then rotate around to the right. And again, you can stay here, or you can lower to the forearms. And of course, you can extend the left arm forward, right arm to the side, and rest on your right cheek. Some people even like to move a little bit more catty corner to go a little deeper into the twist. So there's options. Back up for a moment and come into the Sphinx form. And eventually rise all the way up. Once you rise all the way up, I'm going to move this bolster a little closer because I'm going to use it for relaxation. But we need to kind of reset the back after that twist. Now, just like I said, I like to bring in some kind of side stretch at the beginning of practice to kind of cut down the tension, to make more room for the lungs to expand for breath. At the end of a practice, it's always a nice idea to add in a twist, which we did. But now we need a counter. So we're going to come into that tree frog position, but we're not going to stay here. We're going to move into happy baby pose. So happy baby pose is where we float the feet in the air. Different teachers suggest different things. You can take the peace mudra, first 2 fingers around each big toe, lightly pulling down. You can take the hand hold to the outer edges of the feet,
And then bring your arm strength in to pull down on the feet. My preference is hands flipping to the insoles of the feet, right around the arch. And then just ever so light pressure. Now you still want to keep your sacrum anchored. I think all of us, if we have children, may have pictures of our children doing this pose. I have one of Gabriel doing this when he was probably about 8 or 9 months old, that I used to use for promotions for our Mommy and Me classes. So again, can you feel it through the inner thighs, moving towards the groin and knowing that it's going to connect with those energy channels and move that up through the upper body. All right, we're going to release from that. I'm going to roll to one side because I want to use this bolster for relaxation. We're going to take the bolster to the low back. Now, I see this a lot of times where it's not quite to the low back and then people roll over, and again, that may be what's best for you, but most of us need support under the low back. So I would bring it closer to the body. Roll down upon it. Close the eyes. We started this practice breathing into the backside of the body, imagining that we were like a rough rock that was jagged and moving down into a stream of water, like a river, through the rapids, over the cliff of a waterfall, tumbling to the pool of water below, and then over time and through the ages and through that force, it smooths out. What I want you to focus on now is surfing the wave of the breath through the front side of the body. Imagine it being like wavelets of peace rolling up to cleanse the heart, to cleanse the palate of the mind, to cleanse all the other inner organs. The spleen helps to give a boost to our immunity when it's in checked and balance. It can even help to fight off pneumonia. Back bends are heart openers that help the thymus gland, which is also connected to our immunity system. So you can look at this relaxation in this prop providing you an opening and an avenue as a way to improve your state of immunity, especially during this time. Lowering our stress, lowering our worry, lowering our anxiety, letting go of any fear, grievances, irritabilities, all of this can help to also boost our immunity because we're in a more peaceful place. Mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually.
up to sit. I'm going to sit on the edge of this bolster, and you can always sit on the edge of a pillow or a folded blanket. So if you remember, we were talking about the liver meridian also connecting back to the eyes. And if we have a clean liver, it helps us to see the big picture. It helps us to see with a different angle. So I want us to do just a little bit of eye yoga, and I'm probably not going to be mirroring you because I'm just going to do it the way I'm instructing it. But if you sit up nice and tall, I want you to keep your chin level to the floor, and I want you to imagine there's a big clock around your face or in front of you. And as we shift the gaze up, it would be to 12. As we shift the gaze down, it would be to 6, to the right, 3, and to the left, 9. And what we're going to do is we're going to work around the clock with the eyes, because the eyes are a muscle too. And we can actually pinpoint from this exercise where our muscle may be weak or where our peripheral vision might be weak. So we're going to sit up nice and tall, and I want you to look straight up to where that imaginary 12 would be. And this is not a staring contest, so please feel free to blink at any point, at any time. And then shift the eyes to 1. To 2. This is an area where I'll sometimes feel weak in the eyes. Now to 3. With that Parshva Drishti, looking sharply through the right corner of your eyes. No need to turn the head stays neutral. Now rock the eyes down to 4. This is an area where sometimes I also feel weak. Actually feeling pretty strong today. Now to 5. To 6, straight down. It's almost as if you're gazing past the tip of the nose, but you don't have to go cross-eyed. 7. To 8. To 9. Sharply off through the corner of the left side of the eyes. Move it up to 10. To 11. Back to 12, ever so briefly, then close the eyes. Take the hands together, rub them. Create that heat, create that friction. Build up that energy. And then we're going to feed some warm, loving energy that we've been building in the hands as we cup the hands and place them over the eyes. After all the work those muscles did. Every time I do this exercise, I think of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Coincides greatly with love thy neighbor as thyself, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Let's go ahead and place them over the ears. Over the mouth. Since I mentioned Om Mani Padme Hum, let's bring the hands to the lotus mudra at the heart. Remember, I mentioned this mantra is sometimes inscripted on the wheel of life outside of Buddhist temples. Sometimes you find it outside of, I've found it a couple times outside of Asian restaurants. So I will chant this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Celebrate the jewel of the lotus, the spirit that resides in your own heart. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.